Hi guys, so let's start with how I stop a train on the inner track, and I do that by pressing this button in Pumpkin Inner called Stop the Inner Track. If we go into edit mode and we have a look at this switch, it says stops the inner loop schedule in the Pumpkin block. It basically has no connection, it has no conditions and no operations. It's simply a switch, whether the switch is in the on or the off position. Let's look at the inner and outer, the inner schedules, and understand that this switch is going to be used as a control mechanism for the start of the next schedule. What do I mean by that? So the inner loop comprises a loop A and a loop B. So let's highlight loop A. Loop A starts in Hiking Inner and runs around our track and ends in Pumpkin Inner. And that loop A has a successor called Inner Loop B. And Inner Loop B starts at Pumpkin Inner and runs around to Hiking Inner, and it has a successor called Inner Loop A, and so these things just run round and round. Why do we start in Hiking Inner? We start in Hiking Inner because we want to leave the yard, and the first block in the direction of travel is Hiking Inner. So our schedules to leave the yard, for instance, if we take the lint that we saw in the back here, it's going to leave the yard and ride around to Hiking Inner, and it's going to have again a successor that tells it to run the Inner Loop A around to Pumpkin Inner. So what we want to do when we turn the switch on in Pumpkin Inner is we want to tell the scheduled Inner Loop B that if that switch is on, you don't run. How do we do that? We come to the Inner Loop B schedule, excuse me, double click it. Here we can see it's an Inner Loop B, and its successor is Inner Loop A, as we talked about. But there's a condition for the starting of Inner Loop B, and it's a condition based on the switch, and I've done it this way. If I remove the not condition, you can see clearly it says that the schedule should start in an AND condition. It must have this switch appears to be in the on position, but I'm saying not on. Now you could set it that it must be in the off position, and then it'll start, and that'll work just as well. The conditions either way logically will be met. So by setting it, we set that in the starting conditions of this schedule and not in the loop A. If we look at loop A and double click on it, so it has a successor which is loop B, and also has a condition here. But if you put a condition in here to try and control the successor, that does not work. So you go to the successor schedule, which was loop B, and the condition is in there for what is the condition under which that schedule will start. And we're controlling the start of the subsequent schedule by means of that switch. So let's look at macros and how we build them, how we use them. And I'm going to look at it from the point of view of blowing the horn. I blew the horn in Pumpkin and during the demo 2 times as the loco passed through there, and 1 time as the loco passed through Balloon Inner. And I'm also able to turn off the sound on the layout. Now, some of this turning off will only occur when the schedule starts. So if the loco sound is started, you have to stop the loco, go through a stop operation before the macro will take effect. But let's have a look here at sound is off, just so that we understand what's going to drive all this first. And here we have sound is off when the switch is on. And I like to write it out like that so that it's clear to me what am I doing. No operations, no conditions, and no connections. This is, again, simply an indicator of what the operator wants. Now, let's have a look at where we want to sound the horn. And when we look at this block, pumpkin inner, and we're traveling around it from the left to the right, these grey marks, let me briefly recap. This is the slow down in the block, this is the stop position. The grey markers are action markers, as it says there. If I double click the action marker, it's calling a macro called double horn blip. And if I go out of this and go to ballooning, now we're traveling in the other direction, and here we have another action marker, and it's calling simply a bighorn blip. So I've got two macros. Why do I write a macro? Well, I don't want to write for each train what has to be done. And if I want a horn blip anywhere on the layout, I can just call this macro and it'll execute a horn blip. Or if I call the double horn blip, it'll execute a double horn action. Plus, this macro will also recognize when the sound switch is off and skip the blip. So if we get out of there and we're in edit mode and we go to edit the macro, and here I can click for a new macro, and then when I go to the properties, I'll be able to add actions. So let's start with the simplest here, the bighorn blip, which we've already written. And there's its name, bighorn blip. What does it have to do? Well, let's skip to the middle here first. We turn the horn on, that's the red sign. We delay for 3/4 of a second, and we turn the horn off. That's the blip. And we can change this time period to get whatever sound we like. Or we could create a second macro that says a bighorn long sound, something of that nature. Okay, so that's fairly straightforward. Now, here we're looking at the switch. We have a prerequisite, a condition that must be met for this macro. So if the switch is on, we don't want any sound. And if a prerequisite condition is met, it executes the very next line of the code. And that says go to end, and it goes to the label end. So it skips blowing the horn. If that switch is in fact off, okay, the switch is not on, the switch is off, it jumps over the go to command and it starts to blow the horn and so on. It's pretty straightforward. Yeah, I don't know why I keep getting that thing. And if we look at the double horn blip properties, we've got the same prerequisite to control the sound and the jump to there. But now we call another macro. We call that first macro. We want a short bighorn blip. Then we want a delay of 1.5 seconds, and we want another bighorn blip. That's how we get a double horn. So I think that that should be fairly obvious. So if I've gone back out of edit mode, so we're in running. Now the little guy's here to operate the switch. So when that switch is turned on, we're telling those macros, do not execute. We turn the switch off. Now the horns will blow.